We're Amy, Sophie and Kate, identical triplets and the sisters behind Outspoken, the podcast. Our mum had her hands full raising us, and now it's our turn because, all three of us are new mums too.
But just because we look alike doesn't mean we see everything the same way.
That's why we've started the Mums Group, a new podcast about the good, the bad and the very TMI of motherhood. It's honest, messy, funny and just like having your own Mums Group on tap. Search the Mums Group on the free iHeart app or wherever you're listening now.
Somebody's Daughter is a true crime podcast brought to you by Origins Australia, supporting people separated by adoption. It contains distressing material that some listeners may find triggering and is unsuitable for children. The producers respect the traditional owners of the land on which it was recorded and pay their respects to Aboriginal elders, past, present and emerging. In this episode, we welcome adoptee Colleen Barnard, who was born in the same Magdalene Home in Brisbane, where last week's guest, Lily Arthur, was incarcerated for the crime of being pregnant and unwed.
Colleen describes her adoption journey as a Magdalene baby, the challenges of finding her own identity in a manufactured family, and how the search to find her mother took her halfway around the world, only to find that her mum was living in her own backyard in rural Queensland.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your story.
Right. Well, I came into the world after my mother had arrived here from England. She came out to be a Jillaroo and a nanny on a station called Torrington Station just outside of Toowoomba. Unfortunately, she met fortunately, she met my father at a machinery shed dance in Toowoomba.
Yes.
And had a situation that arose from that.
Beautifully said.
That unfortunately she had to deal with.
Okay.
When she told my father, like most young men of that age from Catholic families, his response was, "Can't be mine."
Okay.
But when she ran away from that and just went, "Okay, I'll deal with it."
How old would she have been?
She was 20.
Yep.
So not knowing what to do, she went to the owner of the property. This woman was a Catholic woman who took her to see Father McMorrow in Toowoomba, who made the arrangements for her to go and be placed in the home at Wooloowin, the Magdalene Laundries. She entered there in January and went from there and had me on the 1st of May.
1967?
1967, the same year that Lily was in there at the same time. So Lily would have known my mother.
Wow.
But unfortunately, they all had to live under false names, and I've never been able to get
what the false name was for your mother.
Out of it to sort of confer with Lily over it, because as I said, because they made them live that way, it made life very difficult for them to track or trace after they'd left.
What we do know is that there was an unmarried mother's home behind the Wooloowin laundry where Lily was incarcerated. So Lily was a prisoner of the state, incarcerated there. So she would not have been allowed into that unmarried mother's home, but she never could understand why she wasn't in that home. But she was a prisoner of the state. She was a ward of the state. So Colleen's mother
would have been in the other area.
But she would have worked in the same laundry at the same time
as Lily.
That Lily Arthur was there. So Lily was there from February to September.
Yes.
And your mother was there from January to May.
Wow.
They would have had to know each other, but they had these false identities.
They obviously everything, and it would have been a very different situation for your mother and for Lily.
Exactly.
A very different
experience.
Absolutely.
So my mother went into the hospital, gave birth to me, gave me up, walked away and was told, "Forget this ever happened."
As they all were.
As it sounds like we're hearing regularly.
Was the regular wording from the Catholic nuns. Now, from there, she went back to Toowoomba, where she went on to get married, have 2 other children. her husband died in a work-related accident 5 years into the marriage.
Oh, no.
And she ended up having to raise 2 children on her own anyway.
Which we found, we talked about that yesterday, it's ironic because she was told by the Catholic Church, by the nuns, you couldn't possibly keep this child, you couldn't manage to raise the child
by yourself,
as a single mother.
And then 5 years later
she's raising two.
Yes, so she did not have an easy life, I don't think. It would have been very difficult. So her husband knew about me.
Okay.
Because he was apparently a friend with my father.
Wow.
So he married my mother when she went back, and then they had their 2 children. From there, after he died, her brother came from England to help her look after the children.
Wow.
He was the only other person that knew about me.
What happened to you after that event?
Well, basically, when I was adopted, the Catholic nuns had to look for someone to place me with. My parents were considered the gold class parents because my father was a policeman.
Right.
He had a good, secure public government job, and my mother had given up work as a insurance assessor to be a stay-at-home mother. They'd adopted a daughter 21 months before me. Mm-hmm. Now, when you have children yourself, you spend 9 months preparing that child for a new baby coming into the home. Oh, mummy's having a baby, mummy's tummy's growing.
You talk about it with them so they understand.
You talk about it so that they are very aware that their life is going to be a big change to what they're going to be going through. My mother had 2 weeks to prepare my sister.
Oh, goodness.
That there's a new baby going to come in and completely disrupt her life as she knew it.
And a 21-month-old wouldn't be very excited about that anyway.
No, they're about to head into the terrible 2s. And
so just to ask, your parents couldn't have children?
It seemed like they couldn't.
Okay.
They had tried for a fair while to have children.
And hence the first adoption, and then you as well?
Yes.
Yep.
So I arrived. My sister wasn't terribly happy about this fact, I don't think, because she would they said she was always mischievous and getting into mischief. So, trying to get some attention back. From there, I was toilet trained at 1.
Wow.
Which is very, very normal for back then.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have these disposable diapers. No. We knew we were wet. We didn't like the wet feeling. We wanted to toilet train. Mm-hmm. So Mum was washing the nappies and she was crying. She didn't think, this was her last nappy. This is the end of my babies, She went to the doctors that afternoon and found out she was pregnant. And that's why she was so emotional. We were actually known as the fertility drug of the day.
Because it did happen.
But that actually did happen, yeah.
What are you told to do when you're trying to have a baby? Forget about it. Go away, relax, go on a holiday. You'll fall. Just don't think about it. Stop trying. Well, that's what happened in this situation.
So they've been trying for so many years.
Yes.
And then they've got 3 kids.
Yes.
Wow.
In a short period
of time. Now, they always told the story. We desperately wanted a baby. We adopted Kerry. Then along popped. Then the nuns begged us to take Colleen. And then along popped Michelle. Well, as a 3-year-old child, she thought this just isn't exciting enough. So she edited her story to say along popped Michelle with a bag of chips and a drink of cordial.
I love Michelle.
Oh, she's brilliant. But that's the person she then became. Mm-hmm. She's always achieved so well in her life. She's had to do so well with her education. She had her letters in music early. She tried so hard to be something more always, which is a beautiful thing, but it's also pressure.
A lot. And so what about your other sister as well? What was the background of her adoption?
Well, I don't know a lot of history because she and I don't talk a lot because we've never had a close bond. As I said, you've got three dynamics coming in as children who have no personality traits alike, no dynamics the same, because so many of the, you know, your DNA wired completely different.
Different backgrounds.
Heritage. You are who your genes make you up to be.
Yep.
And everyone just says nurture versus nature. Well, I'm a big one that there is a lot of nature involved as opposed to nurture. Yes, you can be loved, you can be cared for, you can have all the best of the world, but honestly,
It's different.
it's
different
different
genes.
genes. And no matter how hard you try, you're always going to be different.
And you then become the middle child in this blended family, this created family. But Colleen, could you just tell us a little bit? You spoke about it just before we began. She had this natural affinity to horses that seemed to be in her blood.
Well,
it was.
When they adopted me,
Yeah.
when the nuns went to my parents, they said her mother wanted her to be brought up in a Catholic family, and they wanted her to be brought up with horses. My father was in the mounted police.
The adoptive father.
My
adoptive father
was. And when I finally asked my mother about it, she said, I never asked for any of that. But what I worked out, it was the Catholic nuns trying to assimilate us into their family dynamics, trying to fit us in.
Yeah.
But as I grew up, my grandparents owned a farm in Yangan.
These are
My adopted grandfather. I would get on a horse and I would just go like the wind. And he said, that girl has a natural ability with horses. She's got horse in her somewhere. So that gene was there. I later found out my father was a racehorse trainer and a jockey.
And Mum was a Jillaroo.
And Mum was a Jillaroo.
So
And my grandfather in England on my mother's side used to train racehorses in England.
So it was there all
So
along.
genetically, I had that trait. I'd go to Melbourne Cup and I'd win every year. Went to the races and I'd always back a winner or a place in every race, and people are going, you're nuts. You're crazy. How can you do
got
this?
that in your blood.
And it's just there. And it wasn't that I picked the horses. I always picked by the jockeys and the trainers.
That's because they're in your family.
Because I had a great respect for jockeys and trainers.
But as a kid and growing up,
You'd have no idea
why
No one knew.
you had
But it
these
was
thoughts,
there.
these feelings, these things going on in your head.
So growing up, so you grew up in which suburb?
I grew up in Oxley
Okay.
because Dad was in the mounted police at Oxley.
Yep.
But then, you know, because one of the big things in those days was you had a parent at home, a stay-at-home
Yep.
mother and a father to provide. You know, that
Traditional.
traditional dynamic
Yeah.
of the family. My father, when I was about 6 or 7, had a massive accident off a horse, 10 pegging, which was a sport they used to do, and they'd travel all around the country. You know, he always performed at the exhibition every year. He fractured his skull open.
Oh my goodness.
So he struggled for years with the illness of that. So my mother ended up going back to work. So Mum always picked jobs where she could work only school hours. Like she was first she went to work in the TAB, which was Saturday work.
Back to the horses.
Back to the horses. But that was Saturday work, so Dad was home with us. We were never sort of really left. Then she went to work for St Pat's as a teacher aide and had all school holidays off, and then ended up as a home ec teacher, a home ec teacher's aide at All Hallows. So when you go back to your talents and your traits, I had a natural ability for sewing. My mother was a sewer.
Birth mother?
Birth mother. So I was always able to sew. So every holiday I would sew things. You know, I'd make my own clothes and all that type of thing. So when I found out about my birth mother, she was a sewer.
Makes
so
sense.
she had that
So
ability.
all of those things
so
made
all
more
those
sense.
traits you grow up thinking, why?
Was it a happy childhood?
It was a happy childhood. But as I said, at times it had its difficulty. Every time you'd go to the doctor, what's your family medical history? Oh, we don't know, she's adopted. Reminder.
Yep.
When I was 16, I went to school at Bridgetine at Indooroopilly. I was in Indooroopilly station, and one of the girls, I never hid the fact that I was adopted to anybody because that was part of who I was. One of the girls said, look at that guy over there, he looks just like you. Oh. He could be your brother.
That thought would always be there, wouldn't it?
Then started, as you're a 16-year-old girl, as you're coming into that time of life with boys, the thought that you could end up with someone you're related to just opened.
I've never thought about that in that regard.
Yeah, it just exploded this whole other realm in my head.
It's true though, isn't it? It's true.
And from that day on, you start thinking, where, how, why? And I think that's part of the reason I ended up with my husband. Northern Italian, first generation, knew I couldn't be related to him. No chance at all that we were genetically linked. So as I said, all those things through your life works to build your picture of who you are, not the picture of what your parents want you to be. It's about your natural abilities and your genetics.
Did you find yourself searching? When did you start searching for your parents?
Well, at 18.
Yeah.
When you had that ability, when you turn 18 and you've got the freedom to do things. But I'd found out my mother had actually done it when I was 16. She tried to find out about my sister and I.
Oh, wow.
So when I started looking at 18, she gave me whatever she had from them, which was nothing at that stage because there wasn't much release of anything there.
So she was very open to it, very comfortable, wanted to find the information for you.
Well, at first she did, but then it scared her, I think, because then when I started looking, I think my mother was almost offended.
Yes.
Because it was almost like,
what's wrong with me?
Weren't we good enough? Well, aren't we good enough for her? And it was never in my intention ever to make it about that. They are the people that raised me. They educated me. They sent me to good schools. They gave me so much. And at no time have I ever underappreciated what they've done.
But there's a searching for those.
But there is something there that
your DNA.
You want to know, who am I really?
Yeah, you would.
You know, all these things come up and you've got so many questions. You know, your medical, who you're related to, all that type of thing. It's so important. So at 18, I had a bit of a look around and I didn't get a lot. I think I got my non-identifying information, which was just basically your basics, your mother's age, height, weight, hair colour. Same with your father, a bit of information on your father, but very limited. Then I think I was married in 92, but about 88, I did another. I think it was about 88. I can't remember the exact year. They made identifying information available. So I did another search then, and I got my mother's name. So, you know, but then your life gets busy. And then I think it was 92 when I was getting married, I sort of did another bit of a little search around to find out information. And then when you're looking at having children, I did another little search around. So each time I did a search, I might find a little bit more. I went to the Catholic nuns and asked them for any records from Wooloowin. They had nothing really, but they came back with this tiny little letter about Father McMorrow. Now, this was in June. He died in May of that same year. So by a month, I'd missed the opportunity to meet a man who'd met my mother. So from there, I just went and, you know, started, you know, the next stage of my life, and that was get married. Then I got pregnant, and you start thinking, okay, I'm pregnant. You ring up the hospital to book in. The mater says to me, so what's your family medical history? You look down at your tummy and you think, what the hell could be coming out of me? I'm married to a very strict Italian family. You know, if something strange comes out, all those little Italian mother-in-laws and Zias and everyone would be going, what the? So you do worry. You do wonder. And you don't know if there's Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, anything like that. You don't know.
And that's a massive thing through pregnancies. They ask you that constantly. What happened? What was this? What was this? What was this? So they could actually see the genetics of your child. And not having anything on that.
Not having anything was so scary.
Next, Colleen tells us about her search to find her mother that led her all around the world and back, and the surreal reunion where she introduced her own children to their grandmother for the first time. This is Somebody's Daughter, Someone Else's Child. The Somebody's Daughter podcast. Thanks to Origins Australia, supporting people separated by adoption.
When I found out about my mother, I went through this big journey where I tried to find her in Queensland, did all the searches, but she married over the border, so there was no record of her name change.
Records are separate in states of Australia, yeah?
Yes, legally there was nothing I could do. So someone suggested, why don't you put a personal ad in the Barnsley, Yorkshire newspaper, because I'd found out she was born in Barnsley, Yorkshire. I thought, okay, I can do that. I rang up the Barnsley, Yorkshire News. Now, it was just near Mother's Day. And the editor of the paper actually said, could we please run you as a front page feature? Could you get us a photo? My husband, now this was 25 years ago, raced out and bought a scanner, which was pretty new technology
pretty
at
fancy.
the time.
Yeah.
And we scanned a photo in and sent it to the paper. The article went out for the Mother's Day feature. Her aunt in England saw the photograph and read the article and said it has to be her daughter. She looks exactly like her. She rang her daughter in Adelaide, who then rang me and told me that my mother was living in Toowoomba, and here's her number.
Hang on, where were you living?
I was living in Brisbane.
So she's
Which
gone
is literally 4 hours difference.
Not even 2.
Not even 2 hours.
Just 2 hours difference.
So had she stayed in that area the
She
entire
had stayed in Toowoomba the whole time. Now, this is when you have to stop and think, am I about to set off a bomb in someone's life? So how am I going to go about this to protect her and not shatter her world?
And not shatter your world too as well.
Well, I thought, that wasn't the big concern for me at the time. So I thought about it and I went, okay, I know who her mother and father are. I know about her and the information about her. So when I rang up this number, a man answered.
So this was the number that was given to you by your niece? Yeah, okay.
Yes. No, my cousin, probably, a cousin or something. I don't know, some relation. I haven't worked that one out yet.
That's okay.
So I rang the number and a man answered. Who is he? Is he a husband who doesn't know anything about her past? So the way I decided to handle it was, I'm doing some family history. Is this a Patricia Booth who's the daughter of Arthur and Mary in England, born on this date, blah, blah, blah? He said, yes, it is. I said, I was just wondering if I could talk to her about some family history.
Wow.
Which none of it was a lie.
None of it was a lie.
No.
No.
But it's sensitive. It's a sensitive way.
sensitive
You don't know, like you said, you don't know what you're throwing yourself into.
Who he is, how he's related.
If she's ever spoken to him about you.
Well, apparently this was her brother.
The one who came out from England.
And when she got home from work, he said to me, when he hung up, he said, ring her tomorrow morning, she'll be home from work. Okay, so I left it there and I didn't pursue it any further until the next day. But when she got home, he apparently said to her, this is the call we thought we might get one day.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
The father, her husband knew about me And then the only other person she'd ever said anything about me to was her husband.
And her brother.
And her brother. So from there, she hadn't told her children. So this was probably in about, the day I rang her was the day I was going for my 20-week scan with my daughter. So I was a hormonal mess anyway.
Of course you were. But how old would you have been?
I would have been 33.
Okay.
So I rang her and we sat on the phone and cried and talked and went through so much of it. And she said, "Can you give me some time? I haven't told my children about you." And I said, "That's fine. That's absolutely fine. I have no problem with that. You take as much time as you like." But her birthday was the 8th of August, and I thought, I want to do something for her birthday. So I sent her a copy of the photograph that I'd put in the paper in Barnsley, Yorkshire, with myself, my husband and my 2 boys. And when it came time for her birthday dinner, she set the table up, the dining table up for the kids and their families to come over, and she placed my photo at a place setting. And she said to the kids, "I've got something I need to share with you." And she told them the story. All of a sudden, their whole lives made sense. Because every year between the end of April and June, she would go into a deep, dark depression. Now, one of them was her wedding anniversary, the other was the day of their father died. They thought it was her depressed about that. When they found out my birthday was the 1st of May, smack bang in the middle, they said, "Our lives make so much more sense now. Why you were so desperately unhappy through that period of time." So my brother raced down from Toowoomba and couldn't wait to meet me. We met at the front door and we both just stared at each other. And his wife said, "Aren't you going to hug your sister?" But, you know, we just were looking at each other. It was like this, time just froze. It was quite surreal. Then a couple of weeks, then I had a little accident and fell over, broke my waters at 28 weeks and ended up in the hospital hanging on to my daughter. So there was no opportunity. I was going to go up and meet my mother and, meet her and see her and all that type of thing. But because I ended up in the hospital, she said, "I don't want to come down. I don't want to put you under that much stress at a time like this." So we put all of that off. So I laid in the hospital, held on to my daughter to 34 weeks.
Oh, goodness.
Had her. So for 6 weeks we went nowhere, did nothing. I just dealt with a preemie baby and 2 toddlers at home. And we made arrangements that on the 6-week mark we would drive up to Toowoomba and meet her. I pulled up at her house, and I think for me the most emotional thing for me was me handing my daughter as a full-term baby into my mother's arms. I don't think she took it on board because she was trying to take in the boys and look at everything like these are her first grandchildren. And I think she was trying to see traits and mannerisms and everything going on. So I don't think the impact of what I'd just done hit her as much as it did me. And I found that very emotional, plus being postpartum.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Just a cluster.
Yeah. So that was the biggest day of my life, I feel.
Oh, it would have been huge.
It was so big to have to deal with that.
And did your adoptive parents know that you'd found your mother?
Not at that point.
Okay.
Not at that point, because when I started really looking and starting to look, it became a bit of a problem.
Okay.
Because, as I said, I think my mother felt like I was rejecting all that they had done for me.
That's very sad, yeah.
So I pulled away while I was going through all this because I didn't know what I was feeling, honestly. I didn't. Between being pregnant, hormones, finding my mother, everything, I was an emotional mess. So I wanted to deal with, I'm a person that internalises a lot of stuff like that myself. I've always dealt with my emotions internally and, tried to find the positives out of things, because if you talk to some people, they'll only just give you negatives. And my attitude is I want to bring positives out of everything. Nothing is ever bad. It's all learning. So after that, you know, I had a few years with my mother, asking all of the questions about her health. Then she had a stroke at 55.
Oh, wow.
So from that point on, I sort of had to be careful and learn about that. But I think I became past too hard for her, because I think I brought back all the negative memories from what she'd experienced going through the home, giving me up. I think my siblings ended up finding it hard too, because they were watching their mother go through roller coaster of emotions.
Sure.
And so I thought, for all of our sake, I'm going to pull back. I'm not going to harass them. I found out the information I wanted to, who I'm related to, and medical history.
And did you look like her?
I looked so much like her.
Because obviously you must have, for the people in England, the relatives in England, to say that's got to be her. What was your mother called? Patricia's daughter.
Yes.
And then I noticed in the descriptions in your paperwork, the bit of information you originally got described your mother's weight and height, and she had fair hair and blue eyes.
Yeah.
And then your description as a baby was fair hair, blue eyes.
Well, I was actually a carrot top when I was first born.
Hilarious.
Now that takes me to my father's side.
Yes, I was going to say, was that Dad?
Yeah, because when you follow his family history back, it's Scottish.
Right. Hence why you went to Italian for the husband.
Yes.
That's exactly right. Everything opposite.
Exactly.
No connection genetically.
Connection.
Yeah, but it was Northern Italian, so that was one of the questions my mother asked. What does his family think of a blonde, blue-eyed partner?
Of course.
Oh, they're from Northern Italy, Mum. They've got blonde hair and blue eyes in them because the Celtics
Oh,
of
yes,
the Northern
yes.
Italy,
True, yeah.
the Turks were the southern part of Italy. So I didn't look dissimilar to his family anyway, so it wasn't that bad.
But to suddenly find a family where you've grown up in a family with an older adopted sister, biologically younger one, you're the middle child, you've got no genetic likeness to compare, you don't look like your adoptive parents, and suddenly you've got this family where you would be looking for a sense of belonging from them, really, wouldn't you?
And the irony is, when my mother named me at birth, she gave me the name Susan Mary.
Yes.
But her son married a Susan.
Oh, gosh.
So even in him marrying her, reminded her, brought the memory up of me.
Of course, and that was the name, Susan Mary, of her biological father's great-grandmother.
Yes.
So she was your great-great-grandmother
That's
on your
correct.
dad's side.
Yes.
Was Susan Mary. And she'd got that legacy, been given that name.
And
of
then
a
your
relative.
name was changed.
To Colleen.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's a tangled web we weave, but it's all part of information in my book.
Still to come, Colleen recalls a series of astonishing coincidences that finally led her to track down her biological father, which explained her own love of horses and how she went on to unearth a whole new family she knew nothing about. Now preparing to become a grandmother for the first time, Colleen speaks about the importance of learning about her own medical history and being able to pass on this information to her own children and grandchildren. The Somebody's Daughter podcast. Thanks to Origins Australia, supporting people separated by adoption. How did you get the information about your father?
Well, that in itself is a big journey, because 13 years ago, well, probably nearly 14, I went to Campbell Newman. Mm-hmm. Now, he knew me as the pinnacle soccer mum from the district. We ran business, so we worked with the government and go to a lot of functions with the government as business owners.
This is when he was Premier?
This was when he was the Premier of the state. Mm-hmm. So I made an appointment to meet with him in his office because I lived in his electorate, because normally the Premier won't see anyone unless they're from their electorate. All of the other women from adoption were heading into Tracy Davies' office.
And who was she?
She was the minister at the time for child safety.
Okay.
And of course, what a lot of people don't get is these ministers don't make the decisions. No. It's their advisors who tell them what they can and can't do. So the advisor's saying, no, we're not doing anything.
So what was your aim of the meeting, to go to Campbell Newman?
Well, my aim of the meeting was to try and get access to more information about my father. Mm-hmm. So Campbell Newman is a lovely man. He is very much into his genealogy. He's tracked all his family history. He's very big in it. I walked in with a book for genealogy and said, I can't do that because I don't have half my information. So I sat down and I explained to him I've got the 2 boys who he knew from sport and the district. They have no idea who they're related to, and they have no medical history. And he, of course, understood that these were 2 massive things that people had a right to have. So he sort of went, yep, we're going to get this out, this information for you. And he wrote it, I sat in his office and he dictated a letter to Tracy Davies saying, I want this woman to have her information. And it came back and she said no, because the legislation doesn't allow for that. Because where you go with this is men had no rights because they never acknowledged or were acknowledged on any of the paternity papers legally.
Even in cases where people like Lily gave the father's name, they still didn't, they put father unknown because they didn't want anyone else trying to claim that child when it was earmarked for adoption.
So the laws were tight at the time, so they never signed any documents claiming their paternity because they were kicked out of the picture. From that, Campbell Newman and I rewrote the legislation.
Wow.
To change it to be read as not by much, just 1 or 2 words, but it was enough to release my father's information. He then walked into Parliament and announced that based on the story of a woman who came into his office, being me, he had intended on doing an apology to the Queensland Forced Adoption Society.
So that was the state apology.
So that was the Queensland state apology, which happened on the 27th of November.
Yep.
Then I was at home one afternoon and I got a phone call from Campbell himself. He said, I've got some wonderful news. I've got your father's name for you. And he said his name is Brian Robert Ramsey. So the first thing I did was jumped on my computer, Googled Brian Robert Ramsey. It came up with his funeral notice.
Oh.
Now, most people have that reaction. I went, oh my God, I've got brothers and sisters.
Yes.
I never let anything negative cloud the positive out of it. I wanted to think, hang on, yes, he may have died, but
there's still a history there.
More information here. There's still ways to find out information. So I then rang the Catholic Cathedral in Toowoomba because he was buried out of the cathedral. I thought, I wonder if there's any records or information that I can access from the death paperwork. But the lady in the office, typical country woman, oh, I know the family well. My kids went to school with his kids. The oldest one's still on the property. The second one's a teacher. The third one. And she gave me all this information about the kids. And I couldn't wait to get off the phone and ring my friend Jenny. And Jenny, I was running through it with Jenny. She said, there's a teacher at Nudgee Junior by that name. And I went, no. It couldn't be.
It couldn't be.
It could not be. So I waited for all the paperwork, all the formalisation of it, because the non-identifying information then came with my father's name that had not been redacted. So I had the legal paperwork with it written on them. And again, okay, I'm about to bomb someone's world, aren't I? I'm going to blow up what they've known all their life. So I wrote an email to the teacher. He was the Japanese teacher at Nudgee Junior. I said, I'm doing a research project and I'm wondering if I could ask your help in something I'm researching. Again, not a lie, but he would have assumed it was something to do with Japanese. So he rang me back and said, look, I'm really busy at the moment. Could I recommend anyone else to help you? I said, well, not really. I've just been given information that your father may be my father.
Oh, wow.
Just took a moment and he said, I better come and see you.
Okay.
So he came over to the house, which was surreal having a teacher in your house. And the first thing we did was sat down and calculated when I was born and when his parents met, because we wanted to make sure there was nothing crossing over before we went down this road, because we didn't want to blow everybody's world up completely. So I showed him the paperwork and then I showed him baby photos. He goes, geez, you look like my nieces. Very similar traits. My father had been, with the red hair and the ginger, fair to ginger, they called it. And like when I now look at my eldest son, in certain lights you can see the ginger coming through his hair and his beard. It's very similar. So we sat down and went through things, and I said, I know your father's died, but is there any chance you have anything at home that I might be able to get some DNA off? He said, oh, I don't know. So I rang up. He said he did have biopsies. Now,
because he had esophageal cancer, didn't he?
He died from esophageal cancer. Now, I'd had, my kids all had reflux as babies. I'd had problems with a bit of reflux, so I'd actually gone and seen a endocrinologist doctor, and I had an endoscopy. The irony is, he was one of the fathers of a son in my son's class. His practice, his partner in his practice had been my father's doctor.
Oh, my God.
6 degrees separation keeps coming up in my life.
Yeah,
Wow.
totally.
It's like I'm meant to know things. It's like I'm meant to find out things. I have my father's medical records from their practice.
So you were able to do a DNA
I was able
test.
to do. So then he said, ring the labs because you might be able to get the DNA.
Biopsy, yeah.
But his wife had to release that to me.
He was still alive.
Because she's still alive and she's still his partner. So she's a triple certificate nurse, and she wanted to know because he'd never mentioned anything about me. But if you go back, he would have not known about me.
No, because your mother just left.
Yeah, my mother left. Now,
And
I'm
he
sorry
was
to
under the
say,
impression-
some women did lie to try and trap. Some women miscarried. Some people had stillborns or complications in birthing.
And it was only one night that they spent together.
Well, no, I think they'd gone out for a couple of times.
But he didn't know, though.
But he also said it can't be mine.
Because he went back, she never went back to him or told him anything. He thought nothing more of it. So there was no reason for him to tell his wife about it because they met after that. So
What was her reaction?
her reaction was, well, we need to look at this. So she said I could use the DNA to test it because he didn't mention it to his brothers, he didn't mention it to anyone because they went and asked the brothers, because if he told anyone, maybe he told his brother.
And he hadn't.
But he hadn't because he just didn't think anything else of it. So we then hit the block that they wouldn't release the DNA to me because I'm not considered eligible for it. So she released it, but then I got her to write a letter saying she'd released it to me, not to the DNA lab. So therefore I owned it because at one stage they were refusing to DNA test it because I was no relation.
Right.
So I found a way around it because I'd asked this half-brother if I could potentially DNA test against the brothers and sisters. It wouldn't be as close a match, but it would give you a familial match. Anyway, I went back and argued and put it out a few legal terms and said, hey, I own this because the wife has given it to me. It's not hers, it's mine. Mm-hmm. So they then finally DNA tested and it came back at 99.8% positive. It was pretty conclusive that he was my father. Mm-hmm. So I wrote the wife a thank you letter, but I think I'd blown up their life a bit, and
were there other brothers and sisters?
There was four kids.
And no one knew about you?
And no one knew anything because he'd never said
Did you say one of them taught your kids?
But the second child had actually been the teacher, and that's why I was able to make contact so easily.
Taught her kids was an uncle that they didn't know.
Yeah, and the funny part, this friend of mine who's a midwife used to say, he's got the same physique as my middle son. Before we even knew any of this, because as a midwife, she was trained in picking up aspects of people's bodies. So she always said he had that same physique as this guy before we even knew anything.
It turns out to be
a brother. So again, I didn't want to, the children were all very loyal to their mother. So I'm not going to blow up their life. I needed to make sure that, they're okay. But again, I had history. I could research. I had
you have everything proof. That you needed.
I had the proof. I had his medical history. I had,
You went to the Historical Society in Toowoomba too,
I went up to Toowoomba because I thought, okay, what can I find out in Toowoomba? I went to the Historical Society. I found his obituary. I found an article about my grandparents, his parents, in the Historical Society as well. So I got to know my family through a lot of that. And, I learned about him with the way his kids were raised. And by talking to this half-brother, we didn't have that dissimilar upbringing, really. His father used to go to the races, and a treat on a Saturday would be a soft drink and some chips or something. Like for us, if Dad had a good day on Saturday betting on the horses, we'd go to Hungry Jack's for a special treat. So really, I'd lived a very similar life to the upbringing that my father gave his children. So that in itself was quite comforting, really. So, but again, I haven't pursued them because they're very protective over their mother.
Yeah.
And I'd found out what I needed to.
Do you feel that, because we haven't done a lot of successful reunions, but do you feel that it's brought you some sense of who you are?
Well, that's exactly it.
And also given you some history to give your children and grandchildren in the future.
Yes, because now with my daughter having
a grandma.
About to become a grandma, I go to every doctor's appointment with her because her partner is not able to get in from work all the time. So I go there, and I took my baby book in. I took, my husband's baby book in. All of that information
that you didn't have,
but I never had. All adds to a big picture. To help her and them with her pregnancy. So that information that I can provide is so important to her.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's been really lovely journeying through all of that. But, as I said, it's also created some problems because you have to think outside the box. Not everything comes to you straight up. And this is what I always want to encourage people to do. Because you hit a roadblock, i.e. the death certificate, the funeral notice, don't look at it, I've lost, he's not around. Read into things. Look what else you can do. If someone says no, Campbell Newman went back and rewrote the legislation to change it to be able to do it. There's always something you can do to try and get to where you want to go.
Well, you sort of have, and now you've got a new baby about to come into your lives. You're able to do for your daughter and the baby what you had to fight to do for yourself.
Yes.
But you've got this little history, and people understand who they are. You understand who you are.
Yes, yeah. And as I said, I've also gone through Ancestry, and I've taken it right back to Scotland and all of that sort of history. So that also gives you the history. Now, the irony is my eldest son has taken after his father and his grandfather. They're painters. Yeah, we've got a very successful commercial business that we do painting in. He's got the skills from his grandfather. My husband just says, I don't know how he does it. He's got his fine motor skills are so good. He reminds me of my father, glossing and all that type of thing. Whereas my other son, is a builder. Now, he has followed my side because my grandfather, when I read his article in the newspaper that I got in Toowoomba, he was a builder.
Oh.
And he used to do a lot of work for the Catholic nuns in their, homes in Allara, where he lived. Now, Allara is the suburb right next door to Yangan, where I spent a lot of my life growing up on the farm that my adoptive father's parents owned. And I often say, I wish I could get an hour or two with my grandmother who's passed away to quiz her, because she would tell you everything about everybody in the district and what they were up to, what their kids were doing,
and they wouldn't
who
know
they were.
each other, surely.
They would have all known each other from the CWA and the Catholic Church in Warwick. They would have all been to each other's, they would have been to the funerals, for goodness sakes. They would have all been there through that time.
So it's quite an incredible story.
It is, and it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It's a positive story.
Well, Colleen's writing it, so she's got, amongst all these folders that most adoptees can't get their hands on, she's got a manuscript she's been working on. So we could be reading Colleen's story very soon as well.
Thank you, Colleen, for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to hear such a beautiful, positive story as well.
It's a very uplifting story.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming.
No, thank you for having me.
And since Colleen recorded her interview, she has become a proud first-time grandmother to a beautiful baby grandson called Hunter. Join us next week, where another survivor will be sharing their experience of forced adoption. If you would like any more information about any of the issues raised in this podcast, or have an experience that you would like to share, contact Origins Australia on 0756 270565 or 0414 959 239. Or check out the website originsaustralia.org. For immediate support 24 hours a day, call Lifeline on 13 11 14.